The Battle of Chushu, which occurred on the 17th of September 1894, is a landmark event in the history of East Asia and one of the most significant naval confrontations of the late 19th century. It was the decisive clash in the First Sino-Japanese War, a conflict that would reshape the balance of power in the region and mark the beginning of Japan's imperial rise while dealing a heavy blow to China's long-standing dominance in East Asia. The battle itself, fought between China and Japan, was not only a military engagement, but also a harbinger of the larger forces of modernization, imperialism, and nationalism that would shape the region's future. The roots of the First Sino-Japanese War lay in the growing rivalry between China and Japan over the Korean peninsula. For centuries, Korea had been a vassal state of China, but by the late 19th century, Japan had undergone a rapid process of modernization during the Meiji Restoration. Japan, keen on asserting its dominance in East Asia, sought to reduce China's influence over Korea and establish its own control over the peninsula. Meanwhile, the Qing dynasty in China was already struggling with internal strife and external pressures. Despite its long history as a regional powerhouse, China was slow to modernize, and its military was still equipped with outdated technologies, making it vulnerable to more modernized powers like Japan. In 1894, a rebellion known as the Donghak Rebellion broke out in Korea, which prompted China to send military forces to suppress the uprising. Japan, sensing an opportunity, also sent its forces to Korea, ultimately leading to a military confrontation between the two nations. Japan's quick and decisive actions in Korea set the stage for a broader war between the two powers. By declaring war on China in August 1894, Japan made clear its intent to challenge China's dominance in Korea and secure its own imperial ambitions. One of the key theaters of the war was the naval battle for control of key maritime routes and ports. Both nations understood that whoever controlled the seas would have a significant advantage in the conflict. At the time, China had the Beiyang Fleet, a significant naval force based at Port Arthur, modern-day Lushun, but it was composed mainly of older vessels that were not equipped to face Japan's newly modernized fleet. Japan, in contrast, had invested heavily in the modernization of its navy. The Imperial Japanese Navy, led by Admiral Togo Heihachiro, had adopted Western-style tactics and was equipped with faster, more powerful ships, making it a formidable force in the region. The Battle of Chushu itself took place at Port Arthur, a strategically vital naval base on China's northeastern coast. Port Arthur was not just a crucial military asset for China, but also a symbol of Chinese naval power in the region. If the Chinese Navy could hold Port Arthur, it would be able to control access to the Yellow Sea and maintain its influence over Korea. On the other hand, Japan viewed the port as a key target for its expansionist ambitions. By crippling the Beiyang fleet stationed at Port Arthur, Japan would effectively neutralize China's ability to project naval power and gain control over the region. On the morning of the 17th of September 1894, Japan's fleet launched a surprise attack on the Chinese forces at Port Arthur. The Chinese Navy, caught off guard by the speed and precision of the Japanese assault, was ill-prepared to defend against the modernized Japanese fleet. Despite the size of the Chinese Beiyang fleet, Japan's superior naval tactics and technologically advanced ships quickly overwhelmed the Chinese forces. The battle was a clear demonstration of the power of modern naval warfare, with Japan's fleet using advanced gunnery and maneuverability to systematically destroy or disable the Chinese vessels. The Chinese forces, unable to mount an effective defense, were forced to retreat into the safety of Port Arthur. Many of the Chinese ships were either sunk or severely damaged during the battle, while Japan suffered relatively few casualties. The defeat of the Beiyang fleet effectively crippled China's naval power, leaving its remaining forces unable to contest Japan's control of the seas. The Japanese, having achieved their primary objective of neutralizing the Chinese Navy, secured their maritime dominance and paved the way for further advances into Chinese-held territories. The significance of the Battle of Chushu extended far beyond the immediate naval victory. For China, the defeat was a devastating blow. It exposed the profound weaknesses of the Qing dynasty, which was already struggling to cope with internal unrest and the pressures of modernization. The loss of the Beiyang fleet, one of China's most powerful military assets, left the country vulnerable to further Japanese incursions and diminished its influence over the Korean peninsula. The battle was a clear indicator that China's military forces were no longer able to compete with the rapidly modernizing powers of the world, and it marked the beginning of China's decline as a dominant regional power. For Japan, the victory at Chushu was a monumental achievement that solidified its position as a rising imperial power. Japan's successful attack on the Beiyang fleet demonstrated the effectiveness of its military modernization and its ability to challenge established powers like China. With its control over the seas, Japan was now free to expand its influence in the region, and it set its sights on securing other Chinese territories, such as Taiwan and the Pescadores Islands, which would later be ceded to Japan under the Treaty of Shimonoseki in 1895. The victory also demonstrated Japan's growing military prowess, establishing the country as a new force to be reckoned with in East Asia. The aftermath of the battle and the war was far-reaching. The Chinese defeat at Chushu marked the beginning of the end for the Qing dynasty, which would face increasing internal dissent in the following decades. The loss of the war also contributed to the weakening of China's imperial system, paving the way for the eventual collapse of the Qing dynasty in the 1911 revolution. The Treaty of Shimonoseki, signed in 1895, saw China cede Taiwan and the Pescadores Islands to Japan and recognize Japan's control over Korea. These territorial concessions marked the beginning of Japan's imperial expansion in East Asia and the eventual rise of Japanese militarism. For Japan, the Battle of Chushu was a defining moment that marked its emergence as a regional power. The victory signaled Japan's ability to challenge both China and Western powers in East Asia and set the stage for Japan's future expansion in the early 20th century. Japan's successful modernization efforts during the Meiji period had allowed it to compete with Western nations on the global stage, and its victory in the First Sino-Japanese War was a testament to its military and industrial progress. In the broader context of East Asian history, the Battle of Chushu represents a turning point in the region's geopolitics. The defeat of China and the subsequent rise of Japan as a military power reshaped the balance of power in East Asia. Japan's victory encouraged other nations in the region to modernize their military forces and adopt Western technologies and tactics in order to avoid the same fate as China. The battle also highlighted the importance of naval power in the 19th and 20th centuries, as the ability to control the seas would determine the outcome of many future conflicts. The Battle of Chushu and the First Sino-Japanese War as a whole demonstrated the changing nature of warfare in East Asia and the increasing influence of modern technology and industrialization. For Japan, it marked the beginning of its imperial ambitions and the rise of its military-industrial complex. For China, it was a wake-up call to the urgent need for reform and modernization, though the Qing dynasty would ultimately fall short in these efforts, paving the way for a new chapter in Chinese history. In conclusion, the Battle of Chushu, Kang, was not just a naval engagement. It was a defining moment that altered the course of history for both China and Japan. The outcome of the battle, with Japan's decisive victory, marked the end of China's imperial dominance and the rise of Japan as an imperial power. The battle's consequences reverberated throughout East Asia and the world as it reshaped the geopolitical landscape and set the stage for the events that would unfold in the early 20th century.